For anyone who thought I left, I never left.
Ricciardo wins the Hungarian Grand Prix.
Amazing. Absolutely amazing.
Ricciardo's done it.
Holy mac and cheese balls. That's another podium.
Ricciardo somehow finds a gap there, and he squeezed through Daniel Ricciardo to take the lead.
And for anyone who thought I left, I never left. Just moved aside for a while.
He's back in Formula One at a circuit he's won at in the past. Welcome everybody to F1 Nation, which this week is unofficially rebranding as DR Nation because Daniel Ricciardo is going to be back on the grid in Hungary.
It's good. It's really good. You know, I enjoyed, this, call it 6 months off, and I think it was really good for me. But the more kind of races I started to attend, the more sim I started to do, certainly getting the bug back, so to speak. And then jumping in the car a few days ago, I was like, oh yeah, it all felt very normal. It was one of those ones, like the very first lap, I was like, oh, this is fast. And then within a few, it's all, it's like, okay, I want to go faster now. So it was good, it's really good.
You can hear more from Daniel on F1.com and on the F1 YouTube channel. But we're going to be getting the inside story on all of this from Red Bull team principal Christian Horner very soon. But for now, it's me, Tom Clarkson, two-time Hungarian Grand Prix winner, so close to being a three-time Hungarian Grand Prix winner, Damon Hill, and Pedro de la Rosa, who finished second at the Hungaroring back in 2006. Guys, Ricciardo is back. What do you think?
First, I want to hear Pedro say, for those of you who thought I'd left, I never left. He's back. Pedro de la Rosa.
Yes.
Where have you been, Pedro?
I'm back. I'm back, Damon, at F1 Nation. I'm back. I have mixed feelings, really, about this return. I mean, obviously, extremely happy for Daniel. I think it's fantastic, really, to come back, especially because it hasn't been that long that he was racing. So, and nowadays, becoming a test driver, a reserve driver, if you stay there too long, you will never come back ever again because there's no testing. So it's great for him. Then on the other side, I feel sorry for Nyck because I've been in his position. I know when a team fires you halfway through the season or some races to the end, and it doesn't really, it's just quite tough. One thing is to terminate a contract when the season is over. The other very different is when you are still going through. But this is part of Formula One. It's part of the story. But all in all, it's great for Daniel.
Yeah, I don't think anybody feels negative about Daniel Ricciardo coming back. I mean, he's such a personality. He's worked on that side of things. I mean, it's his natural kind of vivacious kind of self and his massive smile. I mean, I can remember the first time I came across Daniel Ricciardo was when I was president of the FIA. That's a Freudian slip, isn't it? President of the BRDC. And we were giving out awards, and he was in Formula 3, and this guy jumps up on the stage and he's got this smile the size of, 3 feet wide across. And I thought, well, he seems to be enjoying life. And of course, he's had his ups and downs with performance. I mean, he smashed Sebastian Vettel when he was at Red Bull, and then went to, where did he go next? I can't remember, Renault, wasn't it? And then he went back to McLaren, and it kind of never came together. And now he has been away. I mean, he did leave. That's the truth of it. But he's got his mojo back for getting in a car. And now this opportunity has come up through. We're going to talk to Christian, I hope, about how that all happened, because for someone to get into Formula One, someone else has to leave. So there's a whole story there, which we'll go into, because there are losers in this, which is Nyck De Vries. It was given his chance, and now he's been given his P45.
I'm fascinated by the timing of it. Why not wait until the summer break at the very least? Give Nyck 2 more races. Quite why it has to be now seems to me, let's hope Christian Horner can give us a few pointers on that. But 10 races for Nyck De Vries. Best finish of 12th in Monaco. He out-qualified his teammate Yuki Tsunoda twice in Miami and Spain. Does he deserve replacing?
Tom, it's tough. Pedro will confirm this. You give people a chance in Formula One. They either just it's like a springboard for them. I mean, look at what happened to Max. They hadn't got hardly any experience, or someone like Kimi Räikkönen or something like that, or Michael Schumacher. They come in, suddenly they're there. They are on top of it. And I'm afraid Nyck had a fantastic debut, if you want to call it that, at Monza. And he was given another opportunity with AlphaTauri, but it looked like a struggle. And Helmut Marko's comments were that he was never really showing any pace or not showing the pace. Now, Helmut Marko is the hard man of Red Bull. He's the hard man of racing. He's the guy who picks the talent, and he's the guy who literally picks up the phone and says, you're out. He does not have any sentimentality about his business. And we can talk to Christian about that because they are seen as a very tough team to be with. Lots of people have been there and failed. So this is why it's particularly interesting that they've decided, it seems to me, to give Daniel Ricciardo a second life, which is almost unheard of.
Well, that's the point, isn't it? They're not replacing Nyck De Vries with the next Max Verstappen, as you've just been talking about. They're replacing him with a guy who's won 8 Grand Prix. He's 34 years old. He's coming into the autumnal stages of his career. It's a completely different business plan for Red Bull. We've never seen this from them before.
I mean, every team is different. Every team has their own way of selecting their own drivers, of keeping, so Red Bull has always been very clear on their philosophy. So I think this is a clear move from Red Bull. They've done it in the past, and we have to respect them for that, because they've done pretty well if you look in the last 15 years. So I just think that they also, it is also good to bring Daniel back, because it's not only that you bring quality, you bring a guy with a fantastic past, but also a great future. And also it's a kind of way of measuring how good Tsunoda is. When I was at McLaren, one of the reasons why they kept me together with Luis, and they did tests with me, and they knew I was a known quantity. They knew how quick or how slow I was, and I had a level. And then they brought Luis in, try to know how much quicker he could be, in a way, and prove that he had a future with the team or not, alongside Fernando Alonso in the 2007. So I think it's also a good measure of where Tsunoda is in respect.
And do you think, Pedro, that this actually also is a warning shot for Sergio Perez in the big team?
I don't think so, Tom. I don't think there is a strategy behind to say, where is, we're bringing Daniel just to warm up for the future. I don't know. I mean, I don't think they know at this stage. It just very much depends on Daniel Ricciardo. But this is Formula One. It's a mental game. And whatever you do on a race car, and however or whatever special it is, what you can achieve on a Sunday, it will have an effect on your future, on where you go. So I don't think it's the purpose of this change. It's just to put pressure on Sergio or bring him in. But I think for Daniel, you have to take every chance as it's your last race, and make sure that you bring back the car keys, but not necessarily the car, and prove that you're back, that you are still have the speed. Because let's not forget that Daniel was very, very, very quick. He's had 2 very bad seasons at McLaren. I would say that they have really impacted in his future, but he was absolutely stunning in any of the other teams he's been to.
Pedro, we all know Daniel Ricciardo, and we know what a competitor he is. And I don't believe he's come back to Formula One just to drive an AlphaTauri, the team that is currently last in the World Championship. Best finishing position so far this year, 2 10th places. I think there has to be, not the promise, but at least the lure of a Red Bull seat in the future.
Look, Tom, the reality in Formula One nowadays is that Formula One has changed very much from the past. In the past, if you are not racing for a top team, you could take the test driver role and still be active, learn, be in a top team, and if you were as quick as or quicker than the racing drivers, had a little chance to come back. Nowadays it's a different story. You're a reserve driver, a test driver in Formula One is more a simulator driver than anything else. So he's coming back. I mean, I would do the same. I would come back no matter what team asks you to come back. There's no bad teams in Formula One anyway, and you can be bad this year but be very competitive the year after. So you just have to come back, because you need the mileage, you need to be active, you need to strengthen your muscles and be ready to perform if you are called on a more competitive team. is it Red Bull in the future? Is it whichever team? I don't think no one knows, no. But maybe Christian can tell us otherwise later on.
Pedro's been around and involved at the coalface, if you like, in teams, and he's seen the requirements for modern F1 drivers, and he can tell you what's changed. I mean, is it possible that Daniel's been out too long? I mean, how much has changed in the time he's been gone?
No, I mean, he hasn't been that long out. I mean, he's only been, a few months. Will he be rusty? Yes. Will he take the rust quickly off? Yes. There's no problem. I mean, of course he will be painful. He will have neck pains and stuff like that, the day after. But he's had the test also. So I think that is it's good timing for him.
Let's remind ourselves what Nico Hülkenberg was able to do at the start of last year when he subbed for Sebastian Vettel. He'd been out of racing for, at the time, nearly 2 years, and he came straight in and was on the pace of Lance Stroll immediately in the Aston Martin. So I think if Daniel Ricciardo has still got it, he'll be up to speed very quickly. And I actually think if he doesn't out-qualify Yuki Tsunoda at the Hungaroring this weekend, he will be disappointed.
Well, I mean, it's not easy. It's not an easy sport. Huh? I mean, all these cars are very, very complex to set up. There's a lot of toys, in engine braking, brake migration, brake balance. It's not as simple as it used to be. Nowadays, you have to adapt to the car or make the car adapt to your driving style. So I don't know, sometimes you jump into a car and suddenly everything is working for you and you're super happy. Sometimes you jump into a car, and let's not forget that when he jumped into the McLaren, he never felt comfortable with, and he had a couple of years to. I'm sure he will be very fast. I mean, there's no question. When you're fast, and you're fast forever.
There's plenty more to come in our preview of the Hungarian Grand Prix in just a moment. If you want to save time, eat well, and stay on track to reach your goals this summer, you need to know about Factor. Factor offers convenient, ready-to-eat meal kits that can help you fuel up fast with flavourful and nutritious meals that are delivered straight to your door, meaning no prep and no mess, because all their meals arrive fresh and ready to heat and eat in just 2 minutes. Yes, 2 minutes. So treat yourself to more than 34 weekly restaurant quality options like bruschetta shrimp risotto and grilled steakhouse filet mignon. Their shredded chicken bowl is delicious. The chicken was cooked to perfection and so filling too. And if you like a bit of spice in your life, the jalapeno mac and cheese and the queso fundido were big hits for us too, and as good as any home-cooked meal. There's a huge range of flavour-packed options on the menu to fit a variety of lifestyles and easily boost your wellness goals. From keto to calorie smart, vegan and veggie and protein plus. Prepared by chefs and approved by dietitians, each meal has all of the ingredients you need to feel satisfied all day long. They've even got refreshing cold-pressed juices, shakes, smoothies and nutritious snacks to choose from as well. And if you don't have access to a microwave on your busy days, make sure you explore their fantastic lunch-to-go options, where you'll find effortless, wholesome meals like grain bowls and salad toppers that are ready to eat whenever you need them. This July, get Factor and enjoy eating well without the hassle. Simply choose your meals and enjoy fresh, flavour-packed meals delivered to your door. No prep, no mess. Head to factormeals.com/nation50 and use the code nation50 to get 50% off. That's code nation50 at factormeals.com/nation50 to get 50% off. Well, we're joined now by Red Bull team principal Christian Horner. Christian, thank you very much for your time. Let's begin at the beginning. Tell us the story. How did it happen? The great return of Daniel Ricciardo.
Well, it all kicked off in a hotel room in Mexico last year. I had a meeting with Daniel, and it was clear that he was going to, his options for this year were going to be a bit limited. And he just looked pretty broken. And I said, well, why did he come back to Red Bull for 12 months, out of the car predominantly, help us with simulation work and a bit of tire testing and, just come back into the fold and re-find his passion for the sport, because it was clear that he wasn't enjoying things. And to be honest with you, I didn't really recognize a Daniel over the last couple of years that we'd sort of grown so used to it, grown up with us. So that's where it started. And we came in and drove the simulator the day after Abu Dhabi, or a couple of days after Abu Dhabi. It was a complete disaster. He picked up every bad habit imaginable. He was working with his previous engineer, and gradually we unpicked it. And with each session, he just got better and better. You could see his confidence growing, and to the point that he was absolutely on the pace with the race drivers. And so the plan was always to put him in for that Silverstone test. We kept him very busy off-track activities, marketing-wise, and the test was extremely impressive.
What impressed you at the test last week?
Well, it was a little bit like, we tested him 10 years ago. We were looking at, who was going to be the right person to replace Mark Webber, and Kimi Räikkönen was one of the favourites at that point, and we decided to give both Carlos Sainz a brief run to run in a set of brakes for Daniel to drive in the afternoon. Carlos went within a couple of tenths of Sebastian, and then Daniel went quite a bit quicker when he drove the car. And what impressed me the most, I went up to have a look at the test, was bearing in mind he hasn't driven this car, hadn't been in a car for 7 months. Within his third or fourth lap, he was down to a time that was within a second of what, our drivers were achieving. Then his first proper run, as it were, on tires that were comparable, you could see, his confidence was growing and growing. And that first lap, or probably what was his 7th lap, of the day, would have put him on the front row of the grid. So was hugely impressive.
What was going through your mind at that moment?
I was just pleased to see that he, was still able to operate at that level. And you could see, I mentioned to him that would have put you on the front row of the grid, and you could see almost the relief in his eyes, and almost like the pressure release off his shoulders, that he could still do it. He wasn't going mad, and the old Daniel was still there. And then his long runs were very impressive, and the work that he did for Pirelli was absolutely on the money.
So when did the AlphaTauri drive become a thing? When did it become a reality?
Well, it was becoming obviously difficult situation for Nyck De Vries, but there was a high expectation on him because, whilst inexperienced in Formula One, he's obviously a very experienced driver, and I think that there was a general feeling that Nyck wasn't quite hitting the mark. And then the question was, what are the options if we were to switch things around? And from a Red Bull Racing perspective, the most interesting option for me was to see, how Daniel performed. So that was the decision that was made. It all happened pretty quick, and here he is for the Hungarian Grand Prix.
And what was Daniel's reaction when you told him?
Excited. I mean, first of all, he had to be clear that, did he want to do it? Stepping into an AlphaTauri is very different to driving a Red Bull car. It will certainly have its challenges, and I think the thing that we need to be sure is that, was he up for that challenge, scrapping to get out of Q1? And, he seemed more than happy to go back into that situation, to get back on the grid and be a Formula One driver again.
Christian, great to hear that story about how you met with Daniel in Mexico, and you it seems to me like you've thrown your kind of comforting arm around his shoulder, which is not really what we've come to expect of Red Bull. It's very much seen as the hard man's team, and you don't cut any slack. And of course, that's been evidenced by Nyck's departure, or very short tenure at AlphaTauri. But what made you do that? I mean, is it because he's part of the family? I know he's got a huge profile. I mean, that's the marketing side of it is clearly something that he's got that Nyck doesn't. But, ultimately you do have to be quick when you get into the cockpit.
Yeah. What you have to remember is, Daniel had driven with us for 5 years. He'd won 7 Grand Prix in that period of time, some incredible races that he'd and performances that he'd put in. And he'd spent 3 years driving alongside Max. The margins between them at that stage were pretty fine. And so, obviously he made the decision to leave the team and go and explore other options that didn't really work out for him. But I think that the underlying talent was there. And I think, Red Bull has a reputation for being hard on its drivers, but, every driver needs a different scenario, whether it's an arm around the shoulder or a different approach. I think we take exactly the same approach with Sergio, supporting him in his, moments of difficulty as well. And so I think, the junior team can be, there are very high expectations, but Daniel isn't a junior driver. He's already proven himself in the time that he's had with us, and therefore it was just trying to make sure he rediscovered the form that we knew he was capable of.
Christian, I'm curious as to know how Daniel is physically. He's obviously been a few months out of the car, and after the test, how do you see him heading to Hungary? In terms of his physical condition.
But he was in pretty decent shape. We put him, I think, pretty much 100 laps around Silverstone. So it was a baptism by fire. He wasn't asking for the pad on the headrest. Yeah, and he's kept himself in pretty good shape. He's naturally pretty athletic. He's kept his training to a standard. It's going to be a tough one for him in Hungary, which is probably one of the hardest on the calendar. But I'm sure he's in good enough shape.
Did you consider any other Red Bull young drivers to replace Nyck De Vries, someone like Liam Lawson?
Yeah, Liam's doing a great job out in Japan, and felt it was perhaps unfair to throw him into a situation where putting him straight into a car like that. So I think it made logical sense, subject to the tests going okay, for Daniel to step up into that cockpit, and of course by lap 7 of the test he'd already confirmed that.
You've got Checo as well, who has had his difficulties, let's say, for whatever reason, and he's been a bit of bad luck, but a bit of self-inflicted stuff as well. What is Checo going to be thinking when he sees Daniel Ricciardo?
Yeah, Checo's had a horrible run of Saturdays, 5 Saturdays in a row. He's not made it into Q3, and I think some of that, as you say, has been bad luck. Some of it's been a little self-inflicted, and I think we're just trying to help him through that period. He's still second in the World Championship. He's won 2 Grand Prix so far out of the 10 this year, and he started the season in such great form. We just want to help him, rediscover that form. And Budapest is going to be a venue where hopefully he can have a straightforward weekend. We've then got a sprint race in Spa less than a week later, pretty much. So yeah, hopefully Checo can rediscover the form that he showed in Jeddah, in Azerbaijan, that where he was absolutely on the top of his game.
So Christian, what is the long-term objective with Daniel Ricciardo? If he does a good job for AlphaTauri, are you just going to keep him there in 2024, or are you going to look to bring him up to the big team or farm him out to another team? What are you thinking?
Well, look, I think that at the moment there's only something in place to the end of the season, so there's no thoughts or expectations beyond that. We've loaned him to AlphaTauri to the end of the year. Obviously, our drivers, are going to be Max and Checo again next year. But it's always good to have talent in reserve. And I think Daniel is viewing AlphaTauri. He firmly wants to be pitching for that 2025 Red Bull seat. That's his goal and objective. And by going to AlphaTauri, I think he sees that as his best route of stating his case for 2025.
Christian, may I ask who told Nyck about the news? It's always the difficult moment. I remember when I was at Sauber and I was coming into the Monza garage, and everyone knew that I was not continuing except for myself. So who was the brave one?
It all happened a little quicker than expected. Bearing in mind that we hadn't completed the test, but Helmut spoke with Nyck, and he was the one that obviously had recruited him. He was the one that spoke with Nyck about lap 11 of the test, I think.
Is it true, Christian, that you had your reservations about Nyck De Vries right from the outset?
Yes, I think that Nyck is a very capable driver, and a Formula E champion and Formula 2 champion, but he's obviously got a lot of experience. He's not a young driver as such from an age perspective, and I just didn't see how it fitted within the junior program. It was always a stopgap.
Just one thing. We've got the Dutch Grand Prix coming up. Do you ever think along the lines of, well, we'll just let him do the home Grand Prix maybe, or something like that before we move on?
I think it's very difficult to, that would have meant obviously leaving him in the car until after the summer break, etc. I think the situation was clear. It was a question of, okay, what's the point in waiting? If we're going to do something, we may as well get on with it and give Daniel 12 races to see, what he's capable of.
So just to be clear and to finish, Christian, it all happened during the test last week.
Yeah. I mean, obviously before the test, there was some element of discussion with Daniel to say, look, if this goes well, would you be up for driving an AlphaTauri? Because, things aren't quite going as we'd hoped with Nyck, but would you be up for, for that challenge? And he was, yeah, absolutely. That was, he was prepared, if you like, to take a step backwards to try and take 2 steps forwards.
Okay, and look, last one from us, Christian. We're going to Hungary. Max won there last year. You've got the chance to break a 35-year-old record and take a 12th Grand Prix win in a row. Can anyone stop you?
Look, there's always the people and things that can stop us. We've had the most incredible run. 10 Grand Prix this year, 11 in succession, including the end of last year. Yeah, Hungary is a different challenge, much more medium speed. Qualifying can be tricky there with traffic and whatever else. It's going to be stinkingly hot. We're seeing different teams at different times making progress. McLaren came from nowhere. The previous weekend it was Ferrari. The previous weekend to that it was Mercedes. So who knows, who's going to be the main challenger this weekend.
All right, Christian, many thanks for your time. It's great to catch up, and we will see you at the Hungaroring. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Christian.
See ya. So, Pedro, what did you make of that? Some interesting comments, I thought.
Yeah, I thought it was very interesting, really, I think that the interesting line from this interview really has been that nothing is set in stone or on stone. It is in Formula One. You don't get the call saying, "Look, you will be replacing Nyck De Vries for AlphaTauri in the next Grand Prix." I mean, there's always an evolving situation whereby even a known quantity, a race winner like Daniel Ricciardo is asked to drive the car, see how quick he is, if he's up to it, if he's motivated, and then take the next step. It is not like he gets the call and you will be replacing Nyck De Vries in Hungary. You always have to prove yourself. You always have to prove the world that you still have the hunger, that you still have the speed, and that you can really do it. And you're as good as your last, not only as your last race, but also as your last test. And you have to always believe in yourself, always keep testing, always keep using the simulator. You could be replacing any driver in the next Grand Prix. And I think this is the whole story of this comeback from Daniel Ricciardo, is that nothing was guaranteed. He was told or he was asked after he performed so well during the test, the lap 11, Christian said. And this is what is really amazes me, is that Formula One is like that. Everyone thinks there's a strategy behind and everything is clear and, we are thinking long term. But sometimes, most of the time, Formula One is decided on a very short term notice.
And how significant is it that Ricciardo was, a second off the race drivers after 3 laps? I mean, how good a job did he do?
Well, that is a good question, Tom, because the test after a Grand Prix, normally the track, if it hasn't been reset by rain, it's normally faster. I mean, how many times we've been in a racetrack where, in Abu Dhabi, for instance, where after the Sunday, Tuesday, Wednesday, there is this test, the Pirelli test or, young driver test, and the times have always been faster than pole position. So we have to be careful about this, but you always have to compare yourself against the competitors. During a Pirelli test, exactly what tire compounds you're running. So you also have to be very careful about what tires are they, how much faster they can be potentially to the ones that your race drivers qualified with on a drying track on a Saturday in Silverstone. So there's many question marks. But at the end of the day, you have the data. The teams analyze the data. They know exactly. They have a benchmark. They do it in a very professional manner. But you always have to be careful. Testing environment is a lot easier. Or I found it a lot easier when you have unlimited set of tires to come into the pits, try again, make mistakes, go wide, but you still always have another opportunity. It's not the same as in qualifying, where you get one lap at the moment, last seconds of Q3, and you just have to deliver. It is a bit easier in testing. There's a lot less pressure. But he was fast at the end of the day. I'm sure that his neck was gone. You have to build the muscles, and no matter how many hours you do in a gym, whenever you sit in a Formula One car, after a few laps, you can feel your neck. That's 100% clear.
A couple of things are sort of coming back to me, which I'm sort of going through in my head now. But he did say something about Nyck not being, a young driver. He's 28. He's younger than Daniel Ricciardo. But, Daniel's got that track record, literally, 8 Grand Prix victories, and he's had experience with the team. And, with both teams, but mostly with Red Bull. But so they know it's a known quantity. There's just something about this, which is, it seems to me, if this conversation started in Mexico last year, it's very unusual, I think. I don't know. I mean, when Daniel left, it was all a bit of a shock to Red Bull, but he left because he was basically, you could see Max coming, and I think he didn't get that loving feeling. Now they're giving him the loving feeling to come back. He's still got to deal with, he's got to beat Yuki Tsunoda, and he's got to really hit the ground running pretty quickly. He's going to have a massive mountain to climb to get back up to speed. It takes time, and as Pedro knows, when Alonso was out for a bit, it's not easy to just jump back in. It takes a bit of time to get all the neurons and the nerve endings firing again.
Yeah, and I agree, Damon. I mean, there is this point that Daniel is used to the Red Bull because he's driven there for how many years? He said 5 years, 5-6 years at the Red Bull team. So he knows the car. He knows very much the people, the simulator, the behavior of the car, all the engine toys. He's used to them. He has experience with the power steering of the car, which also gives all the feedback of the front tire, which is nowadays extremely important in a modern Formula One car. So let's not forget that he's not coming back to Red Bull, a Red Bull car. He's coming back to an AlphaTauri, which will mean that he will have to reset himself. The grip level will be different. How you feel the grip will be different. He will be driving the same engine, which is an important point. But there's many things that he will have to readapt. It won't be an easy test like the Silverstone has been, because he's going to find a new environment.
But he mentioned also that we are talking 2025, aren't we? If Daniel Ricciardo is going to be back in the Red Bull main team, so next year, that's still a long time to wait, and he'll be 35 then. But that's not to say you can't do it. I think experience counts for an awful lot in Formula One now, as Fernando has shown, and also Lewis. And it's an enormously complex business, and it's quite difficult to get on top of if you just jump in. So it takes a few years, but ultimately you still have to be quick.
Yeah, but the good thing, Damon, is that when you are racing in Formula One and then suddenly you're out, and then you realize how good Formula One is, how much you want to come back again. It just extends your driving life. So I think that Daniel, he's currently 34, but he has proven that he wants to continue. He has proven that he wants to do it badly, because if he has decided at his age and with his level of experience and number of races he's won that he wants to come back in an AlphaTauri, it just proves that this guy has what it takes, really. I'm very impressed when a driver of his caliber, wants to come back with a team that is not winning.
So, final thoughts on this. How quick is he going to be at the Hungaroring? Will Daniel Ricciardo outqualify his teammate Yuki Tsunoda? I'm going with yes. I've got an awful
feeling it's a no. But I hope it isn't. I hope that Danny has a fantastic return and is the prodigal son who gets all the attention and the story is good. I mean, we always want the best. We don't want to see people, suffer. But someone has to pay the price. I mean, if he's quicker than Yuki suffers. So it's a tough old business, and you can't have two winners, I'm afraid, in this business.
We'll see. It's going to be difficult to be faster than Yuki straight away. I'm pretty sure Daniel will strengthen himself and build on. But hey, it's a new team. It's a new car. It's not what he's used to be, to drive. And we have to give credit also to how quick Tsunoda is, and he's been driving this car for several years. So one step at a time. I think this is not going to. It's not designed to happen in Hungary, but he will definitely be stronger and stronger as the championship goes. And let's not forget something. Mileage is very expensive. It's very difficult. And I think at the end of the day, it's great for Red Bull to have a test driver that is active in another team, because he's usable at any point, in any time, if anything happens. So I think it's good for Daniel. It's very good for Red Bull.
Well, let's look at the bigger picture for Hungary now. Red Bull going for yet another win, but who are going to be their closest challengers this weekend? It was McLaren last time out at Silverstone. They made what Christian Horner said was, they came from nowhere. Do we think they're going to continue that form this weekend? Lando Norris isn't convinced.
We do have a poor car, and I say poor. It's, I would say, pretty terrible in the slow speed corners. Extremely difficult to drive. I feel if we're getting excited, and I accept that, but we're going to go to a couple of tracks coming up where I'm sure people are going to be saying, what have you done now? Like, how has it got so bad all of a sudden? So good things have come from the upgrade, but there's still plenty of things which are miles away from, say, competing in certain places with the Mercedes, and then in as a whole package competing even with the Red Bull. So a lot more work to be done from both of those areas.
Behind Red Bull, it really has been an extraordinary season. Just look at the past 4 races. Red Bull's nearest challengers have been at Silverstone, McLaren. In Austria, it was Ferrari. In Canada, it was Aston Martin. And in Spain, it was Mercedes. I mean, throw a dart against the wall, because who's it going to be this weekend?
Yes, so it's very interesting. I tend to agree with what Lando said. I mean, sometimes drivers play down expectations when things are going well because they don't want the extra pressure. But I do think that you can't compare Hungary with Silverstone. Silverstone is predominantly a very fast circuit, so the aero is working overtime. Once you get to a slower, although it's got lots of corners, Hungary, their corners are typically not that quick. It's a slippery old circuit, hot track, and lots of 180-degree radius corners. So that means you're in a corner for a very long time. And the weight of the car, these cars generate, the aero drops off quite a lot as you get to the slower speed corners. And of course, then the mechanical side of the car becomes a greater factor. And if that's not so strong, which is what Lando seemed to be suggesting, then it could be not as promising there for them. But there's a hell of a lot to consider with these cars. You've seen teams coming and going depending on circuits. There's a lot of circuit specific performances going on with something like Williams. In the slippery tracks, they're fine. I'll be keen to see how they get on in Hungary as well, because they're not the car that you think is able to generate enough downforce and low speed grip and traction and stuff that you need in Hungary.
Yeah, I think it's when you listen to Lando, I don't think that he's actually trying to get the pressure away. It's just the fact that it's so close between 4 or 5 teams now that is very circuit specific. We will go to a track and there will be there could be Mercedes, it could be Aston, it could be any of these teams, and we are talking about teams that can make it very difficult to make it into Q3, because we are talking at 4 or 5 teams, which is already 10, 12 cars over half of the grid. So it's difficult to know when you approach a track how quick you will be. That's how tough it is. That's how close it is. And that's how great Formula One is at the moment. Every team knows how competitive they will be. Obviously, we know that Red Bull is the team to beat. But then again, it could be that Hungary doesn't play into their strengths either. You never know. we have to do, as a team, the best possible job you have with the variables you can handle, and make sure that if there's anything happening at the front, that you will pick up the points.
Pedro, with your Aston Martin hat on, do you think you guys will be closer in Hungary than you were at Silverstone?
We should be, definitely. I mean, we knew that that Silverstone was never going to be our strongest, so we will go back to Hungary, a circuit which is has more known type of corners where we were competitive in the past, and we will see. But it's also fair to say that other teams have made huge steps, like McLaren, and we just have to concentrate on our development program and make sure that we don't stop, and that's all we can do really, is just make sure that we make also improvements in the next few races.
I'm excited to see what Ferrari can do. It was a pretty lousy weekend for them at Silverstone, but I think we saw in Austria and Canada that they have made progress. They were too conservative, I think, with strategy at Silverstone. And I think if Ferrari can make the right choices on the pit wall, I expect them to be more competitive through the slower turns of Hungary. Now, look, before we move on from Hungary, I'm very aware that I'm talking to two Hungarian Grand Prix legends. Damon, two-time winner. Should have won in 97 as well. We all know that. Pedro, that amazing second place behind Jenson Button in 2006.
Should have won as well.
Pedro, the British TV commentators were a bit distracted by Jenson's win, of course, in 2-6. But here's how the Spanish commentators called it.
Ole Pedro, por fin, ahí tenemos a Pedro Martínez de la Rosa, tras tantos años en el dique seco, entre comillas, sin poder competir, con un talento extraordinario, con McLaren.
Extraordinario. I've always thought of you like that.
Yes, and the ole is also good. Ole, yeah, that is a template, a Spanish template. Yeah, great times, man. I mean, what can I say? It just feels like if it was yesterday. It was a fantastic weekend to remember. But life goes on, and it just looks too far away now for the people to remember. Still something that I will... In a way, I always, after that race, the McLaren engineers looked at the strategy and they said we should have won it, because we took some wrong decisions when the safety car came out, when there was refueling. The safety car came out because of Kimi as well, who was trying to move out of the way, letting me by, and then he crashed with a Toro Rosso. I think it was Liuzzi. So anyway, it doesn't really matter if I won or not, if the team won or not. We finished in the podium. We finished second. It was my best result, and it's also fantastic to be in the podium as a Formula One driver. It's not something that I was dreaming of when I was a kid. So that was fantastic.
It was an amazing race.
And we're remembering it now, Pedro. We're not forgetting it. So it's not too long ago. But how did you feel physically after that race? Because I always thought Hungary was one of the most brutal races that we did. I didn't do Singapore, obviously, but looks even worse.
I was looking at the graph, my heart graph, the other day when I was at Sauber in 2010, and I finished 7th then, and my heart beat was between 165 and 173 during the whole race, except for the safety car periods when I went to 140. So it was pretty high. It was pretty hot, but to be honest, for me, it was not a difficult one, because as long as the drinks bottle worked and you could drink 1.5 liters, which is what the regulations say, that was fantastic. Was okay, was enough, was no issue. There was a safety car was always welcome, I must say, and must admit, but it was not like Malaysia or Brazil or Singapore. I mean, Singapore was terrible. It's one of the hardest, even if it's a nice night race. You have no oxygen whatsoever. You're pulling the hand in the straights just to get a bit of air into the cockpit. So all in all, Hungary, it's a difficult one, but not that difficult compared to others.
And Damon, I'll never forget you and me sitting in a tapas bar in Madrid with Juan Pablo Montoya. This is years ago now. And you were telling Juan Pablo that you didn't do karting. You were racing motorcycles at the time. And Juan Pablo looked at you and said, well, Damon, if you never karted, How and why were you so good in Hungary, which is just like a grown-up kart track? Can you explain why you're so good? He was baffled.
Well, it is like a kart track. I loved it. I just thought it was one of these places that I could sort of maneuver the car and drift it and get a balance and stuff. So it suited my style. And I think also from racing bikes, what you have is a much greater power over the contact patch than you have in a car. So you've got quite a lot of horsepower going through a very small contact patch, and then you're leaning over as well. And so I got used to using the power to balance the car. And that's what you get in Hungary, is you've got an opportunity to reach the limit of traction at the rear and use that. So you're balancing on the throttle as much as anything else. And it just suited my style. And I had some fun. And the Arrows race there, which I nearly won, which you mentioned before, the car was just so brilliant. The handling was fantastic. But then I had Bridgestones and everyone else had Goodyears. So I had a slightly unfair advantage, but it was fun while it lasted. I did enjoy it. I did enjoy the track.
Now let's move on to, well, I think it's our favourite part of the show. It's Ask the Nation. And this is where you put your questions to the F1 Nation team. Email them to f1nation@f1.com, or you can send them to me on Twitter. I'm at Tom Clarkson F1. We've been inundated this week, guys. Let's start with this one from Siwi Kiwi, who asks, what does Daniel have to do to be considered for a Red Bull drive? What are Red Bull and Helmut Marko's expectations for him?
What you need to do is be faster than your teammate in this sport. The only way of getting back into a Red Bull drive is just to blitz the opposition, and your teammate is your first rival. So that's what he needs to do. It's not a given after that, but if he doesn't do that, he will not be able to drive the Red Bull for sure.
All right, and finally, let's go to this from Greg Rust. Hello, Rusty. It's great to have you email the show. Now, Rusty says, g'day, mate. As an Aussie, I'm so excited Dan is back, but I spend a bit of time in New Zealand, and the mainstream headlines there are all about how Liam Lawson was overlooked. They want to know what this means for Liam, and I guess this is the Aussie-Kiwi sporting rivalry again. What does it mean for Liam?
It must be very frustrating. You're trying to get a break. You're ticking all the boxes. You're a reserve driver or you're a test driver, and then somebody comes along and sort of parachutes in from above, and they've not gone through. They're not lined up in queue, if you like. But I mean, definitely Daniel Ricciardo has got all the advantages that someone like Liam Lawson doesn't have right now. That's really tough. I understand that. It is more difficult to change the guard at the front end of Formula One, but Liam will get his opportunity. I'm absolutely certain of it, because the indicators are good for Liam, as from what I've seen anyway.
He's won 3 races from 6 in the Super Formula Championship in Japan. He was 3rd in FIA Formula 2 last year, ahead of Logan Sargent. I would say his best chance, Rusty, is if Yuki Tsunoda gets outperformed by Daniel Ricciardo over these remaining 12 races this year. I would say there's a very high chance that Liam could be in the second AlphaTauri next year. That's what I'd be thinking if I was Liam, trying to put a positive spin on it for him. All right, thank you everybody who wrote in with questions for Ask the Nation. On these preview shows, we always will include as many of them as we can, but that's it for this week. Pedro, Damon, thank you very much for your time this week, guys. Let's do some podium predictions for Hungary this weekend. Go on, Pedro. Is anyone going to beat Max Verstappen, or is he actually...
I don't think so. I think that they are the clear favorites, and it's not only about Max. I think also Checo will be very strong there. So clearly the guys to beat again in Hungary. They are very consistent as well in all the type of tracks, type of corners. They're super, super efficient. So they are the benchmark.
I agree to some point. Obviously, Max, I think Checo will have a good weekend. I hope he has a good weekend. But I think, let's say Charles Leclerc is second and Checo is third. How about that?
With a Max win.
With a Max win, obviously. That goes without saying, and that will equal, and it has to be said, to break that record of consecutive wins in Formula One history, that is an all-time record. So I think this is going to be an all-time record season.
There's certainly going to be no shortage of motivation at Red Bull this weekend. The lure of breaking the record for the number of wins in a season for the team. Max Verstappen wanting to pulverise the opposition, continue to do that. So yes, it's hard to see anyone beating Max. I think best of the rest this weekend is going to be Ferrari. I'm going for Charles Leclerc. I think he's very good on this sort of track. And let's put a Lando Norris up there. I think the McLaren upgrades are going to be better than he was telling us earlier in the show. Time now to tinker with our F1 fantasy team, F1 Nation Racing. And a little bit of behind-the-scenes news for you, because the team who work on F1 Fantasy tell us that Daniel Ricciardo will be available to pick for your team this weekend. So we'll be bringing him in as soon as we can. And remember that drivers score points if they get driver of the day, and Daniel's got to have a good chance of that in Hungary, whatever he does in the car. We'll keep Verstappen, Alonso and Norris in our race seats. We'll swap out one of Albon or Ocon for Ricciardo. It depends on how much the Honey Badger costs. And we'll tell you what we did on next week's show. The battle at the top of the F1 Nation World Championship is incredibly close. The top 5 teams are covered by just 51 points. The damn must-hold remain in the lead, but will they still be there after Hungary? We shall see. You have until qualifying on Saturday, that's this Saturday the 22nd of July, to make changes to your team. It's totally free to play and you can join our league at any time. Just search F1 Fantasy and the F1 Nation World Championship. Well, guys, thank you very much. We will speak to you both again very soon.
Thank you. Thank you, Tom. Thank you.
I'm not in Hungary, but have a nice time. Don't get too hot, guys. I think if I were you, I'd take an inflatable paddling pool.
There's normally one of those in the paddock in Hungary, isn't there? Anyway, we'll do our best. Look, that's it for F1 Nation this week. Thank you, everybody, for listening. And please look out for new episodes of F1 Beyond the Grid and Formula Y this week. And F1 Nation will be back next Monday from Budapest with our review of the 2023 Hungarian Grand Prix. F1 Nation is produced by Formula One and Audioboom Studios.